I'm not going to say much. I'm going to say a few things. I'm trying not to repeat what Costas has said. I want to say a few things about the recent European Court of Justice decision, because I'd like to open the floor, if possible, later on. So I'd really like this to be a debate about this case, about what we're trying to achieve. I just want to emphasise a few points. The first point is one I will repeat again, because Gandonas reminded us of it, but the first point is that the recent decision, in its decision, refers to the fact that the real property rights of the rightful owners of the lands occupied by Turkish forces since 1974 subsist and remain valid, in spite of that invasion and occupation and continuing occupation of Cypriot territory. This decision does not affect the landscape and the long settled position established in previous cases, the Greek Cypriot title holders and owners who own a vast majority of the land. I said own, I didn't say owned, in the occupied areas have not lost their lands, nor have they been exchanged by some illegal decree by the unrecognised regime in the occupied areas. So we all know, and Costas Frangeskides mentioned the Titina Loiziba case, but we should also remember the first instance case where Mr. Justice Jack held that Mr. Apostolides and all the other thousands of Greek Cypriots, by inference, remain the only legal owners of their properties. These properties have not been expropriated in law or somehow lost. They are under illegal control and have been since 1974. They cannot be given to anyone else or taken away without their legal and formal consent. And I just want to emphasise that, and Costas has also mentioned that. Mr. Justice Jack mentioned that. He also made the point and made it clear that the Orams are in illegal occupation of Mr. Apostolides' land. And next point, again, it's been made, but I want to reiterate it and emphasise it, and it's an ethical and cultural point. It's a very important point, and it goes to the root of the Cyprus issue. The Cypriots, and I'm British, but I'm a British Cypriot and proud of it, the Cypriots who cannot currently return to the lands want their properties back. But not only, and this is what seems to be emphasised in the British press, because they want the bricks and mortars and the value of the land. Yes, they do want the value of the land because they want to give it to their children for obvious reasons. But also more importantly, and as Miletis Apostolides mentioned today, they want it because it is their heritage and birthright. Please don't forget that. So when we are told that we should just accept compensation, remind them that compensation will not be enough. The Cypriots want their lands back and they want their island reunited, but no amount of money will compensate for that. The next legal point, as a lawyer, I'm fascinated by the law, the next legal point here is very important. As well as not affecting the basic rights of the Greek Cypriots to the title to their lands, nothing in law also affects the jurisdiction of the Republic of Cyprus over the whole of the island of Cyprus. It remains the only legitimate state over the whole of the island, including all the occupied villages, Agantho, Ayas Ambrosios, Limnia, where my father comes from, and all the other parts of the occupied areas remain under the jurisdiction of the Republic of Cyprus, including when it entered the EU in 2004. So this is all, you may say, well, I'm saying nothing new, but I just want to make those points and repeat them. So why is this recent decision important? It's important, and yes, we have to caveat it, because there is appeal pending, and we don't know what will happen. We can't guarantee what will happen. But this particular decision, having regard to those caveats, is very important. It sent a strong message. But who has it sent a strong message to? It sent a strong message to, unfortunately, thousands of my fellow Britons, who are the ones who are buying most of the land illegally. But there are also Germans and other EU citizens, or non-Cypriots, who have been illegally purchasing and occupying properties in the occupied areas of Cyprus. And this message is, you must not continue with this. It's not right, and it's not legally right. Whilst they have previously turned a blind eye to the ethical and moral considerations of the rightful owners of these lands, they should not escape the force of law. They cannot simply hope, and we all saw, many of us would have seen the ITV programme, where the impression I got was that many of the Brits, unfortunately, thought they could basically hope to buy cheap land because eventually there'll be a political settlement, which means that the illegal occupation of other people's land, and it's not other people's land they've had for 5 years or 6 years as a holiday home, it's other people's heritage that's been there for thousands of years. In the hope, these people, in the hope they buy the land, that there will be a political settlement, and eventually their occupation, as Mr. Justice Jack said in the first census decision in the Apostolides case, their illegal occupation of this land will eventually be legalised, basically a legalised form of theft. Now, thousands of Britons have unfortunately bought cheap properties in the occupied areas in the knowledge that the persons or companies who purported to sell them that land had no legal title to that land. Now, unfortunately, whilst many of these individuals may have no moral conscience, they must now be told, in no uncertain terms, that they may not only lose their own investments, but are likely to face legal action from the rightful owners for compensation for the time in which they've lost their properties, but also to ask and demand them to be removed from those properties. And all those judgments, technically, subject to the appeal, can be enforced against assets anywhere in the European Union. I say subject to appeal, but this particular decision, as Costas has mentioned, is binding across the EU. Now, these Britons, as we saw in this particular programme and as we've seen in the press, probably hoped that those risks were small. However, this decision makes it clear that whilst the Greek Cypriots, and this is the problem of course, the Greek Cypriots whose land it is, they can't enforce the judgments, they can't go back and get the lands back because there's 50,000 occupying Turkish forces there. Slight difficulty. And the European Court of Justice has upheld, this is the important point that Costas mentioned, the European Court of Justice has upheld the jurisdiction of the Republic of Cyprus courts to issue judgments against these individuals and to enforce judgments, if necessary, against their assets wherever they may be in the European Union. So the European Court of Justice has sent a simple but very important message that the power of the law and not the gun must hold sway in Cyprus. So I'll finish off again by saying, for those, if there are any in the audience, who may be thinking of buying property without proper title, apart from all the ethical and moral concerns, the risk is not only that you are likely to lose your investments, but you are also likely to face legal proceedings. So I hope I've mentioned some of the main points. I didn't want this to be my speech to be a legal speech. I wanted to raise the legal issue because they're important, because they are a way in which we are trying to uphold the rights of people like Mr. Apostolides, who should be allowed to return to their homes without fail. Anyway, that's my presentation. Thank you.